Grab your beverages and turn up your interweb. Solving the world's problems 12 ounces at a time. It's Dudes and Beer. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to episode 327 of the Dudes and Beer podcast. What has become a guest update of a guest update. Like, tonight's show is going to be revelatory and amazing, folks. We have such an all-star lineup tonight. I had reached out to Dennis Stone about a week ago, dawning on me that, oh yeah, I spoke to Dennis Stone specifically about coming back on the show after the solstice. So I reached out to Dennis Stone, and I hadn't heard back from him, so of course I panicked and I reached out to somebody else. And he contacted me back the same day Dennis did, and it was like, oh, well, okay, if you can come on for an hour, then you can come on for an hour, cool. Then somebody else who'd been booking, mad shout-outs to Michelle Freed out there for snagging L.A. Marzulli as fast as she did for this show, because she was like, yeah, you know, we started talking about L.A. and his recent appearance on Coast to Coast AM, talking about his documentary, UFO Disclosure, The Coming Great Deception, and Luciferian Endgame. And as we were talking about that, I was like, you know what, man, I should have tried to reach out to L.A. because he would be a great person to abut against Dennis Stone, who is the owner of America's Stonehenge. It was like, that'd be really cool because, of course, L.A. has the whole Nephilim series of books. That is his thought form on what has happened over there. So I was like, that would be a really cool adjunct. And she just went and she got him. So we've got Dennis Stone followed by L.A. Marzulli, followed by Mitchell Gerber, UN Whistleblower, talking about Chinese state-sanctioned organ harvesting of Falun Gong practitioners. We had him on during episode 300, and I promised him that we would have him, much like we do our good friend Billy Joe Kane with the Radical Empathy Education Foundation, doing work against human trafficking. I was like, that is a cause I can get behind, and I need to have you on the show time again and again and again and again and again to drive this point home. And the Uyghurs have been in the news lately. Falun Gong's been in the news lately. So it was one of those, like, I really need to have Mitchell on while that is a topic that's on people's minds, just to bring that point forward more. So we're going to be getting in to that and so much more tonight. Please do not forget to stop on by dudesandbeer.com. That is, of course, where you can go and get the free Dudes and Beer app. That's where you can tune into the show every week. Please do not forget that while you're enjoying the Dudes and Beer website, stop on by and visit our sister site, Curious Realm. We will soon be transmutating, folks, into the Curious Realm. We can no longer grow as the Dudes and Beer podcast. We can't even make an ad on Facebook as the Dudes and Beer podcast. It gets blocked for promoting beer. And I guess, you know, the label beer. So this is going to open up a whole new realm of guests to us. It's going to open up a whole new realm of possibilities all around the place for us and all around the universe. So we're very excited about our transmutation into Curious Realm coming to you this December. Of course, while you're online checking those out, please do make sure to stop on by the Dudes and Beer Facebook group, which will soon become the Dudes and Beer, well, not Dudes and Beer, but the Curious Realm. So that's where you can find all the news that we post, all kinds of stuff, joining the conversation that we have going on. It's a public group. There are a few rules that you have to agree to, but it's basically be a human being. Don't call people names. Don't poke fun at what people believe. So yeah, stop on by, check that out. And of course, while you're online, stop on by our sponsors, True Hemp Science. True Hemp Science is the maker of some of the best darn CBD products out there, folks. I use them daily. I am told by my doctor to supplement my diet with CBD for my anxiety. I have traveled to dispensaries all over the country in legal states, and I am here to tell you they are some of the best on the market. It is made right here in Austin, Texas. Christopher Lynch is right up the road. He's a great guy. You can stop in and see him. Anything that you order online at truehempscience.com, use the code DUDES7, and you will get 7% off your entire cart, as well as, get this, folks, in addition to that 7% off your entire cart of $50 or more, you can also get 2 free edibles. So yeah, this right here is the size of their cookies. There are 2 cookies in this bag, so you would get one of these or 1 bag of 2 brownies for free with that code DUDES7. Once again, the website for that is truehempscience.com. And while we are being shameless and self-promoting and everything else, before we bring in our guest, Dennis Stone, this evening, let's hear from our sponsor, Podcast Cadet. Have you considered starting a podcast? Looking for a way to make your business a voice of authority in an industry? Then Podcast Cadet is the solution for you. Whether starting a podcast for yourself, your brand, business, school, church, or just plain fun, Podcast Cadet is here to help you navigate the waters of the podcast industry. Specializing in one-on-one consultation and training with industry professionals in fields ranging from podcast technology and editing to distribution, monetization, and even social media strategies, Podcast Cadet tailors their services to the specific needs of you and your podcast. Do you already have a podcast and trying to find ways to engage and grow your audience? Sign up for your Podcast Cadet audit today and let us help you explore new and exciting ways to leverage your content and elevate your podcast brand to whole new levels. From consultational workshops to affordable podcast production and maintenance packages, Podcast Cadet is your one-stop shop for everything podcast related on the internet. Visit podcastcadet.com today to sign up for your consultation or training and use code DUDES20 to save 20% off your entire purchase. That website again is podcastcadet.com. Podcastcadet.com. Full disclosure, I am one of the creators and owners of Podcast Cadet. We are getting ready to be out actually with our podcast boot camp. If you're one of our listeners out in the Houston, Texas area, get ready for Comic Palooza 2021, folks, because it's on, it's happening. It is coming up the 17th and 18th of July. So that weekend, we will be producing our free podcast boot camp. We normally charge for that, but at events like that, we go out, we put it on for free. We teach people how to podcast. So stop on by podcastcadet.com. DUDES20 is your code to save 20% on your way out the door. Now that we are done with shameless self-promotion for the night, it's time for other people to be shameless about their self-promotion and what they do. Dennis Stone is the owner of America's Stonehenge. And just so you know, folks, that this isn't something that like he found and he was like a rich shale oil magnate or something like that. To be fair, he was a commercial airline pilot, so he lived a pretty wild life, folks. He's got some great stories, but Dennis Stone actively grew up on this property, so he has seen it go from really its discovery or rediscovery in modern times back in the 60s to now. And with Solstice having just happened, how did things go this year at the Solstice? Dennis, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me on. Nice to hear from you and be on your show again.
Oh, man, thank you so much for coming on, especially on such short notice. Like I said, this whole amazing guest package just kind of rolled like a snowball wildly downhill in a Tom and Jerry cartoon and came together.
Yeah, worked out great. Yeah, exactly. It worked out great. And LA's a friend of mine, so that worked out pretty good. Yeah. Well, as you said, we just had the solstice, the summer solstice, and on Sunday, on Dad's Day, and it was a beautiful day. And we had a nice turnout for the sunrise, and the sun came up. And in New England, you never can predict the weather. It changes pretty quickly. And sometimes you'll have a year where a lot of the astronomical events are just clouded in, But the last couple of years, we've been pretty lucky. We've been able to watch the summer solstice, winter solstice, and equinoxes. And this year was beautiful. And we actually had a turnout on Friday evening, a special showing, but that one clouded up. But on Wednesday, almost a week ago, I went up there and took some shots of the sun just to get ahead of time, and they came out absolutely beautiful. And we have opened up all the alignments with a forestry project over the last 2 years. We hired a licensed forester, and he basically managed the whole thing. And our goal was to open up all the alignments so you could really see them well, with the sun rising and setting, the moon rising and setting, and star alignments. And also clear out like fire avenues too, because about 11 years ago we had a big fire up there. About 15 acres of land was consumed of the 110, and we had fire departments from 30 miles away trying to fight it. They had a hard time trying to get at the fire. They were actually trying to drive their vehicles on some of our snowshoe trails, which are kind of narrow, So that was part of a plan that we've had, and the alignments look so much better now. The first one we opened up in 1965, so you can imagine the trees are slowly filling in over the years, and actually filling in to the point where you can almost see the sun's rise or set, and is in the trees. So this year is really the first time we've been able to see the alignment so clearly, and you can actually see the sun go down in a slope, and it actually, on the summer solstice sunset, there's actually two hills, and where they intersect in a little bit of like a little dip is where the sun actually sets over a stone monolith. And the horizon's about 5 miles distance. And when we first opened that one up in 1973, you can see where the hills kind of dipped, and it was just a really beautiful scenic view. And I think they chose that, specifically this hill, because the horizon around us is like we're in the middle of a bowl. And the horizon's about a half a degree uplook, and it makes for a better sunrise, sunset, moonrise, and moonset, rather than like a zero elevation, or angle rise like over the ocean. The sun's very distorted. It's beautiful, but it's very big and distorted. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of atmospherics there. So you can actually watch the sun now. It actually rolls down the hill from left to right, and you can see it now because we've cleared the trees, and it goes right down. And then just before it sets, it hits the top of the rock. Wow. And really pretty, yeah. And the sunrise is kind of like that, too.
Mad shout-outs to our mutual friend, Mark Eddy, who connected us to begin with. He actively sent me a picture from the other day of the sunrise sunset rock.
Oh, that's cool.
That's
good, yeah.
But a picture from way back, it says over here in the corner, it's at wall marker B. So you can see that actual elevation that you're talking about. You can see that whole path that's been cleared to unobscure the view. And like you said, really doing this forestry project over the last couple of years to renovate it to the way it was when the ancient people who built it lived there, so that we can understand it better, right?
Oh, you're right on the money on that. Yeah, we're pretty sure the hill was more open back 4,000 years ago and 3,000 years ago. We have done a shovel test pit study. They call it an STP study. And that started people have been doing excavation up there since 1937. But in the 1990s, we were joined by the president of New Hampshire Archaeological Society, and she just retired from us last fall. She was with us from 89 all the way up to last year. And she began this project mapping the hill and looking for geological information. Her husband was a doctor of geology at Tufts University in Boston. And he was a great aid, for the geology. And she was looking at the archaeology, of course, too. And from that, she said the hilltop was probably about 75% bare bedrock, like a big bald hill with some soil, vegetation, but not as much, forest as we have today. And you can see outcroppings of bedrock all over the hilltop, even today. And so the ancient people probably had to remove some vegetation and some trees, and they would use the trees for various, log roll, to move the rocks. They need log levers and log rollers, and probably other things they needed the wood for, including fires, But the hilltop was probably more bare at that time. So they had a pretty good, view of the horizon. And we have 57 different astronomical alignments on this site, which is quite a few. 24 star alignments, and then the others are the lunar and the solar alignments, so 57 alignments total. So you can imagine all the different places we have to cut the trees to watch these,
Yeah.
And,
and
it's a lot.
I just popped up on screen the LiDAR image that you sent us last time that was actively, and just so y'all know, what you're looking at on screen, all the red outlines underneath that are like the tetrahedral, or not tetrahedral, but polygon shapes, are the actual remnants of stuff, and the colored straight lines that you see are the number of observations from point zero that can be done, at least known observations over landmarks there on the property right now. That's a ton.
There's a lot. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, the more we look at the site, the more we study it. And like you mentioned, the LiDAR, the more things are being revealed to us, the more complex the site is. And my dad even drew a couple of different maps back, in the last 20 or 30 years. We have the dates on them when he drew them out. There's actually, if you draw up from one point to another point to another point, and these significant points like a standing stone or a corner of a wall, for instance, and back to another standing stone, he found equilateral isosceles and Pythagorean triangles through the entire hilltop. And another gentleman independently did something similar, and he came up with a similar result too. So maybe there's a geometry to the wall patterns and the standing stones. So that has to be more work, more study on that, I think. But defining that, of course, at other sites around the world, the ancient geometry. And so we have astronomical. We have the possibly the geometrical shape to the site. And we're also finding possibly the standard unit of measure used for building the stone structures and the walls. And the standard unit of measure, we think possibly is a megalithic yard. But again, more work will have to be done. The LiDAR can see down to 1 centimeter, and we're going to use that to work on this project of determining, what measure was used to build this site.
Well, yeah, because of course, without knowing the standard unit of measure that's being used to build it, a lot of aside from, of course, and I'll pop the map up again, the blatant straight line observations from point zero to known constellations, points in the sky, things that matter. Aside from that, everything else would be almost hearsay and conjecture, because it's strange. The history of the property is a little bit strange. The native people that live there, the Native Americans, just talk about it kind of being there whenever they moved there. At least that's what local register shows, correct? From like the 1600s, something like that?
Yeah, in fact, we have the name of the two Native Americans that sold the property for something like they sold it for £3 and so many shillings, and we became part of Haverhill, Massachusetts. We're called the Haverhill Peak. And that was until 1741 when New Hampshire and Mass finally settled the border dispute, and then we become part of New Hampshire. But we have names of the owners of the property going back to 1734, or at least part of the hill. That was part of the Patty family, Seth Patty. And then in 1744, Seth bought another piece of property on the hill, which we think included the site where the main structures are and a lot of the stone walls, where the astronomical alignments are too. And so we have actually a kind of a timeline of ownership and use going back to that early time period, of course, all the way up to modern day. But Native Americans, some of the legends were they were kind of, they thought the place was kind of a taboo place. However, they did use a glacial cliff shelter that's on the west side of the hill. It's a beautiful shelter, rock shelter, and it overlooks the Spigot River, which is a tributary of the Merrimack River, one of the bigger rivers in New England. And we found pottery in 1959. My dad did, along with some other archaeologists, and that was Middle Woodland period pottery from about 1800 years old to about 2,500 years old. And so Native Americans were on that side of the hill. And Pat Hume, our archaeologist back in the 90s doing shovel tested study, as I mentioned, she found a wigwam down near the visitor center, actually right next to the parking lot. It was a 30-foot diameter wigwam. She found all the post moles where the posts rotted in the soil, two fire pits. And the fire pits actually were carbon dated to 1,700 years old and about 2,000 years old. So that might have been a winter shelter, and they would have gone a half a mile to the glacial cliff shelter for the summer to stay cool, you know.
And that's something very interesting to bring up that we talked about actually at length last time you were on, is the fact that most of the East Coast Indians were more nomadic. They didn't necessarily like build rock shelters. You know, they migrated with what they were hunting and what they were fishing and with what grew and didn't grow with the drastic change in seasons, like you were saying.
No, that's correct. Yeah, from what we understand, the Native Americans in the Northeast, and they go back about 10,000 years in New Hampshire to the Paleo period, but they were not known to build stone structures and stone walls and standing stones. However, we're kind of looking at that again, you know, just to double check. And I mean, how do you really prove who built the site and who built all? Because there's about 800 of these sites from Quebec all the way down to Pennsylvania, you know. And ours is like a Reader's Digest version. It's on 110 acres, but it has all the features you can see from, you know, Ontario, Canada, all the way down to Pennsylvania. All those features kind of in one hilltop, you know, standing stones, cairns, chambers, the sacrificial table, everything we have. But there is a town in North Stonington, Connecticut that has something like 8,000 features over 35,000 acres. And it has everything we have at our site, you know, but spread out all over the town in a book called Ceremonial Stonework by Markham Starr, came out in 2016. And when I ever saw that at a meeting down in Groton, Connecticut, and opened it up, because I had already found 3 what I thought were serpent walls, but I had no frame of reference, you know, to any other. I never heard of that before, you know, a stone wall looking like a serpent, you know, or a snake. And when I saw the book, opened it up, and I found he has a whole chapter devoted to some of the 400 serpent walls in that one town, 30 feet up to 3. And I'm like, that's what we got at our site. And then to find out they're in the Berkshires in Massachusetts or in the Hudson Valley in New York. And they're actually in Colorado and Alabama. A gentleman's been working on the ones down there. And they have standing stones and cairns over this 40 square mile in Alabama. And they have walls that are shaped like snakes, and they call them rattlesnake walls. And we've been in touch with Dr. Holstein from Jacksonville State University. He's aware of what we have in the Northeast now, and we're aware of what he has. And I was going to visit him last summer, but COVID-19, we canceled 2 trips to go down and see him. But they have the same thing down there, too. So it's not just a New Hampshire or New England or Northeast thing. It seems like recently I found it goes all the way up to Weed, California, out near Mount Shasta. They have the serpent walls out there, too. You can see them because it's there's not much forest where these are. It's pretty open land, kind of like rangeland, but it's hilly. And there's the serpent walls sticking right out like a sore thumb, unlike the Northeast where the trees and the vegetation and brush conceal them so badly, you know. That's why we didn't see a lot of owls, because they were hiding in the woods, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, even right now, I've got that LiDAR frozen up on screen because I had all the pictures that you sent me running through a slideshow, and you can clearly see right on the map where that serpentine wall is, where it's down on the bottom, and it just looks like a wave in the middle of everything. And it really interesting feature, like you said, not really commonly seen in a lot of places. So let me bring up the actual picture. There it is. There's the picture of the serpentine wall right there, and you can see right there, folks, where it is like a huge purposeful S-curve. It's not like somebody trying to build a straight wall got a little bit out of line between 2 trees. Like,
it's very deliberate.
It is a deliberate S-curve.
Yeah. In another thing, the S-shaped one, there is one like that I have a picture on my phone from Indiana, and it's called Mound State Park, and it was the White River. And the picture, again, was taken over 100 years ago, and it looks just like that, and it's in the river, though. I Google Earthed it about a month ago, that whole state park, and I went along the river on Google Earth, and I could not find it. So I don't know if the river was high and it's under the water, or whether it's been washed away. I might want to contact that state park and see if they know about it, you know. Because they have a lot of mounds in India. There's something like 5,000 ancient mounds. Not all of them are there today. And because Ohio next door had the Great Serpent Mound and about 10,000 mounds. But the Great Serpent Mound might be something like our stone walls,
Yeah.
And it could be the constellation Draco, maybe which is the serpent or the dragon that inspired the ancient man. We don't know for sure. It's a suggestion, that Draco might have been the inspiration.
Yeah.
But some of the serpent walls are straight or linear. Some are 90-degree head or 90-degree tail, so kind of rectilinear. And then some of them are shaped like that S, kind of a curvilinear. And some of them loop around. Like the biggest one we have, I think, is 2,550 feet. Starts at the Watch House, which is number 2 on the map. It's the first thing you really see on your way up to the site on your normal tour. And we've been walking by that since 1958 when we opened, and people were walking before that, going back into the 30s when the first archaeologists worked on the site, and going way back in time because the place was used by picnickers and by other people up there in the Patty family too. We've walked by there. We never really recognized we're looking at probably a serpent's head with a 2,550-foot body, and it comes around in a loop counterclockwise, and it does undulations up and down. And some of these undulations are the astronomical different kind of cross-quarter days, like November 1st, and actually the equinox sunset. But it comes right in front of its head. It does one more hump, and then does a 90-degree twisted tail. It looks like the head's biting the tail, possibly like the Ouroboros.
Yep.
And we have, I think, 3 Ouroboros. And I never knew about an Ouroboros until about 4.5 years ago. And that's, I guess, a symbol of eternity, I think, or infinity. Yeah. I think it's eternity, and it's a circle of life. And Egyptians, there's ancient Greek artwork. I think even Native Americans looked at that symbol too. But you can Google Ouroboros, and they found elsewhere too, in other places in the Northeast. So it's not just our site.
Yeah, and of course, the Ouroboros is the quintessential image that you see everywhere, folks, of the serpent eating its own tail. And one of the interesting ones is of course the twisted serpent eating its own tail, which is almost an infinity symbol. So whenever you start looking once again at that S-shaped wall that y'all have that seems so deliberate, it's really phenomenal to compare and contrast those two thought forms, and to think about that being a possibility.
Right, and a lot of the serpent walls will have a flat stone that was, quarried off the bedrock, and the bedrock is foliated, so it does come up in flat layers, and that's what they use for roof slabs. They used it for the vertical wall slabs we call orthostats, the sacrificial table. We have a whole network of underground drains on the site. They engineered a complete system of underground drains, and the little capstones over the drains. Some of these drains run 75 feet, and you have little capstones. Those flat stones, too, came off the bedrock. But what they did is they took some of these flat stones and they stood them on the edge. And when they stood up vertically, they call them orthostats. And when you're looking at it on a serpent, almost all of our serpent walls, I think there's a couple exceptions, but they do have these vertical slabs. We call them spine stones, like a spine. I don't know, just another word, but they all seem to have that repeating pattern, in each. So it's not like the Patty family were 5 generations of shoemakers, and they did some domestic farming, but farmers' walls are pretty straight. I think you were talking about that. They're pretty straight, pretty linear, and they do have some exceptions. And they're made out of a lot of rounded type field stones. When New England has about 240,000 miles of stone walls built in the last, 250 years roughly. And before that, they were building a lot of wooden fences, But stone walls are everywhere in New England, and most of them are farmers' walls. But when you look at our walls, they turn, they twist, they bend. And then we have the serpentine walls that do all of that too. And then they'll have a triangular boulder head or a big glacial boulder. And it looks like a head, actually, And then behind it will be the undulation, And so North Stonington, Connecticut has everything that we have at our site, but they have about 400 of the serpent walls.
Wow.
And some of the serpent walls have beautiful linteled windows. These are like rectangular openings in the walls, sometimes near the bottom, sometimes a little bit higher up, but they have a beautiful linteled stone. And there's no purpose, no practical reason somebody would go and build that, for a farm or whatever back in the colonial or post-colonial period. But we have 14 serpents at our site, and we have found so far 14 windows. And my dad died in 2009, and he He didn't know anything about them, and he did spend quite a bit of time looking at the walls, but with the brush and the foliage and everything, and maybe not having your eyes open, you know. And he tried to keep his eyes open for this stuff,
Sure.
but nobody recognized maybe some of these walls are serpents, and that these windows actually exist. And we'd be one of them's right on the regular trail up to the site. It was right down near your feet on the left. And a few of our visitors probably saw them as they walked by since 1958, but nobody mentioned it, you know. And that's one of the 14 windows. It's a beautiful window. They call them spirit holes. Over in England, they call them soul holes, I think. I got a friend in England, and she's pretty well known, and she sent me a picture of one of hers, and I said, yeah, that looks like one of ours, too. And it was megalithic over there, you know, nothing historic. It was very, very old.
Sure.
And they said, yeah, the spirits would flow through there, you know. That was one of the thoughts, you know, spirituality and that type of thing.
And I paused our slideshow again on feature 19, one of the large chambers that you guys have. That, if I'm not mistaken, it actually faces the sunrise opening, correct?
Yeah, I can't see the picture, unfortunately.
No,
I'm trying to think.
All right. It's just it's one of the larger chambers that y'all have.
Yeah.
Chamber 19.
Yeah. 19. Okay. Yeah.
Specific.
Yeah.
And I remember in our last episode, I raised the question if perhaps they were like archeo-acoustic in some way, where perhaps you were supposed to be chanting in that area, and it would maybe project that sound out to the observers of the sunrise. Something like that. So
exactly. That might be the V hut. I don't have the map in front of me, but the V hut looks like Wedge Tombs of Ireland.
Yep.
And our V hut, actually, the size and the shape of it's very similar to what my dad and I saw over in Ireland when we spent a week there back in the early 80s, around 83.
Yeah.
But the orientation of ours is facing the southwest, kind of looking towards the winter solstice sunset, kind of in that direction.
Yeah.
But the ones in Ireland, they all face southwest too. They're all, you know, it's like the same orientation, the same architecture, you know, the same features. And then the east-west chamber right next to it runs true east and west. And that was about 30 feet long. And in France, in Ireland, and in Holland, they have they call them gallery graves, and they're used as tombs, like the Wedge tomb was probably. But it's the same. It looks like the same. When I show pictures of the ones over there, it looks like this chamber right here on your site, you know. The orientation and the architecture looks the same. And it could be coincidental. I mean, archaeologists mainstream like to think everything's a coincidence, including, I think, our 57 alignments for the sun, moon, and stars, you know. But I don't.
That's a lot of coincidence, dude. When you're talking about almost an alignment a week, that once again, as we brought up last time, especially for a hunter-gatherer society, one that was not necessarily like cemented to where they live, you know, and they traveled from place to place. If this was somewhere directly in between that range, that would just make sense for it to be kind of a home base for them to astrologically tell how many more weeks do we have before we move over to the other pasture and start looking for deer over there.
Right, exactly.
You know, especially whenever, and once again, when you look at all the points, like, there's almost one per week. It's crazy. There's
a lot of work there. You know, it's either a lot of people building for a while or a few people building for a very long time, but they had to,
precise reason at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, just moving those big stones and, you know, engineering the whole network of underground water drains and then building the structures on top. And then the astronomical center, we were talking about this in the 1970s, and I have a map drawn up about 1977 with alignments off of that. I think the days, you know, summer, winter, spring, and fall, and then the cross quarter, the days in between. But we think they moved it maybe around 2000 BC to its present location. So maybe the site evolved over time, you know, like Stonehenge was built in 3 sections, you know, stage 1, 2, and I think ours may have been 2. That's a thought presently. Even back in the 70s, it was too.
Well, and you know, of course, any good astronomer would take into account the fact that the planet wobbles.
Right.
You
exactly.
know, that there is a deviation of magnetic north, that there is a deviation of the North Star, that there can be a deviation of the tilt of the planet, given certain activities, Earthwise, everything else. So the fact that perhaps once again that stone, that main marker stone may have been moved, or the fact that the center or even the site itself may have been moved for better observational status, is not beyond the realm of reason. Knowing,
Right.
like, good Lord, over the last couple years, it's been out all over the place that half the reason people's GPSs are off and everything else is that the North Pole is moving at almost like 1/8 of a mile a day. It's crazy. It's moving at a larger pace than it's ever moved before.
That's a great point, because that's what we were doing. We started actually surveying the site with a professional survey team in '73, and in 1977 we sent 5 years worth of survey data to the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and they put it in their computer, and the results came out in '78 that if these stones out here were used for astronomical markers, they would work about 1800 BC, plus or minus about 250 years, and that agreed with a 1971 radio. We had 12 carbon datings taken between '67 and 1995, but the 1971 date on the main site and the structure called the Chamber in Ruins was a third carbon dating from that structure on a wall, next to a wall, or what we call the north wall of that structure. And that date was about 1800 BC also. So the Harvard-Smithsonian report said, yeah, it would work about 1800 BC plus or minus a couple hundred years due to the Earth's tilt. There's the cycle. It's the obligity cycle. It's about a 41,000 year cycle, and the Earth tilt changes about 1 minute every century. So 40 centuries, 4,000 years is 40 minutes, and the sun's about 30 minutes across, half a degree across. So it's, when you look at the solstices, they're off about a sun plus a little bit more. The sun's width plus a little more. The same with the moon. The moon is a half a degree across, too, the same as the sun. But they're off a little bit. But the equinox is still on. The cross quarter days are off a little bit, and the solstices are off. So, yeah, it's noticeable. And a guy named Sir Norman, what was his name, from 100 years ago, Lockyer, Sir Norman Lockyer, I believe. Some people consider him one of the fathers of archeo-astronomy, along with Dr. Alexander Thom from Scotland. But Lockyer said, hey, some of these alignments are off here. They're not quite on the money. And if we could go back in time and determine, when they would align, we could actually date them using astronomy. Yeah. And so he was already on that 100 years ago, and that's what we use today, So that was a good point. That was a good point you brought up.
Well,
because of processional. Go ahead.
I was trying to keep myself from smiling like crazy on camera, because, man, once your pilot brain takes over the math, it's like I could totally hear you in your head, like being able to calculate how many pounds of fuel you have left to safely make your flight, just like on the fly, because that's how fast the brain of a pilot moves with that kind of stuff. So it was just great to hear you run that mathematical delineation down. And it was like, wow, man, that's some great stuff right there.
We use the same, I think same brain cells go in there, but we love this kind of stuff, the astronomy. And I used to talk to my co-pilots as we're flying along, about these ancient sites, they all seem to really enjoy it too, the mystery of it, and some of the technologies from the past and some of the modern things we're using to help date these sites, and to map them with LiDAR and stuff. So they thought that was, they were kind of into it too. But so a lot of things went into that whole thing, in the 70s, and then more survey work was done later. And I was just talking to that same surveyor, Charlie Pearson. What a great guy. His dad was Beverly Pearson, and he was the president, I believe, of the New England Surveyors Association. I'm going back over 45 years. So he hired somebody very reputable, and Charlie has just retired not too long ago, and he sent me an email this year. So he's still around. He's still doing well. I told him about the serpent walls, and he was just totally amazed, because when they go out and they just measure points, and they put brass pins in like the monoliths where the alignments are, they would measure corners of walls. But he wasn't looking for serpent walls, neither were we. And I said, when you connect the dots, he's got to come up and take a look. So that he doesn't live too far away. So he wants to come back after all this and check them out,
And that's just it, like that's a great point to bring up. Even the fact that he's a professional surveyor, if that is not the delineation of thought that he is approaching that with, he's just coming in and getting points of data.
Yeah.
He's
yeah.
not,
Yeah.
he's
and,
not
yeah,
like,
yeah,
hey, am I trying to put these into a pattern or anything like that? So he's just coming in and giving blind, raw points of data like that without thinking about it in any kind of necessarily linear format of like, could it be this? Could it be that? Does it match up with this?
Oh, that's, yeah. No, you articulated that very well. And I just looked at one of his reports from 1980, actually.
Oh, wow.
He had like one of his many reports. This is only a 4-page, but one thing he does mention is that the walls do look different to him because the walls have so many slabs of stone stood up vertically or like a monolith or on their side or and there's niches. But he didn't see the serpentine thing, but he did see there's a difference between the farmer's walls, which are usually pretty straight. And these walls turn, they twist, they bend, they have all these big slabs of stone rather than just rounded field stones. They do have some of them too.
Yeah.
But he did note that though. He did note that because at that time, he had 7 years of survey under his belt. I think it must have been 73 when he started, up to 1980. And then he had several decades after that of survey work. And he wrote some papers later too, and later in time when he even had more experience with that whole thing. But he felt our walls were not farmers' walls, and he looked at old boundaries, historical boundaries and stuff. A couple walls do line up, but most of the walls do not line up with historical boundaries.
I mean, even just bringing up once again the LiDAR data on the screen and looking at those red outlines. Good Lord, no surveyor in his. You had one heck of a drunk surveyor. If that's the dude that was, and even back then, folks, I'm even talking the 1700s. Surveying was pretty damn accurate.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, surveying, even going back to the time of plumb lines and the Egyptians, was pretty accurate.
Oh yeah.
So to know that would be like, good Lord, I would never want to mitigate that property dispute. If those were property lines on that map, on that LiDAR map, I wouldn't want to touch that with a 10-meter cattle prod, man. Like, are you joking right now?
You brought up a great point because Jonathan Patty, the one that a lot of people gave credit for building the entire complex and the 110 acres of walls and all of that, he actually not only was a shoemaker, but he actually did a survey on some of the town roads. So he knew how to survey too. He would have made straight lines, I think, when he built had his walls built or built them himself and surveyed them first, and he was a tax collector.
Tendency for any human brain.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But when you walk our walls, you'll see these walls. They have big radius turns, sometimes they're short turns, and they just and there's a bow tie shaped wall too. I don't know if that shows up on one of the LiDAR images you have. It looks like a big bow tie, and actually it's partly astronomically aligned. And there's no purpose for that wall, and it's beautifully built. It has nice straight ends on it. And it serves no purpose. It's not a field clearing. Like in New England, when you plow a field, you take the rocks out and you either make stone walls or you make a pile. You get rid of them because you don't want to hit them with your plow the next time,
That's
and
right.
every spring, the rocks come up because of frost, and you grow a new crop of rocks every year. Hopefully the crops come up as good as the rocks come up, But when you're up on this part of the area, the bedrock is exposed, and the soil, where there's soil only a few inches deep, we check for plow marks all over that hill.
Yeah.
We found one plow mark, and we think it's where they set a plow down. So the area was not cultivated up there. The whole hilltop was not. It's all rock. The soil's not arable for growing crops. It's not very good soil. I had the University of New Hampshire Forest Extension Service up several times. Phil Ozier came up, and he says, your trees are anemic. They're much older than they appear. They don't grow much because your soil's so poor here,
Yeah.
And the last guy we got in from there in 2018, it was a new guy, and he goes, this place. He said the same thing, and he also said this is a good candidate for a forest management program and to clear out your alignments and to make the forest healthier and get forestry people in here to take out the trees. So so it's not a place where people were cultivating the land and growing crops up there. That's not why these wells were built. Some people suggested that, but that's
precisely. I mean, that would of course be a suggestion. Is people live there. You're going to grow crops here. You're going to grow crops there. But once again, this is really more a common spot in between the two home ranges of the local natives.
Yeah, I think so. and it's on a hill too, which is usually a sacred kind of thing. And I think the 15 acres that you see with the LiDAR is also the 15 acres that we did with the that has a serpentine wall that wraps around 2,550 feet. And again, serpent can be protection too. So maybe that wall, and it does undulate in many places, and it is, we think it is a serpent's body. It might be protecting that 15 acres, saying this is a sacred area here. Outside is an unsacred area, but in here, it's holy or sacred or whatever. And it's on a hill too, like a lot of ancient, either you build a pyramid, put it on top, or you build your religious sites up high, closer to heaven,
Sure.
A lot of cultures did that. And that's what and a lot of the sites in New England are like that. They're on near the top of the hill, usually just offset from the top of the hill, like our site. It's just
well, and it perfectly makes sense. And once again, I've got to download this image off Facebook tonight before I forget. The one that our mutual friend Mark Eddy sent, and I'll send it to you because it's a fantastic image that I think really illustrates that degree rise in the terrain to the sunrise rock that you're talking about, which of course, if you were having a place of worship, anything like that, where there's some kind of sacred alignment happening that you want to observe, you would want that to be elevated above you so that, hey, short people down front, tall people in the back, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we have that problem.
You would want to make that as commonly available to everybody as possible. So if you make that event happening slightly above head level, it's going to be a whole lot easier for everybody in the crowd to see that sacred moment than to be like, consarn it, John was in my way again this year. I guess my crop's just going to rot in the field. Thanks, John.
Yeah, the grade works for that, particularly in the summer solstice very nicely, because you do get the biggest crowd in the summertime too, and heads in the way, get down in front, but it works pretty good on that one because of the slope of the land there, So it's another good point.
If you keep everybody back behind marker B, everyone should have a decent, even view of the whole event.
Even at Stonehenge, they get, because this year they didn't let people in again, although some people did get in there. But yeah, there's only a certain amount of space you can actually witness that when, or you got heads in the way and people in the way and all of that stuff. So it might have been more like the high priest, or priestess or whatever watching this with the other higher ups next to them. And then the more common people behind them still trying to watch the event, I'm sure,
no different than I'm Roman Catholic. No different than if when you walk into a Jewish temple, when you walk into a Roman Catholic church, there is the common floor and then a stairway that leads to the altar, and then typically another stairway that leads to what would be the Holy of Holies or the tabernacle.
Right. I was Episcopalian. We had that. My wife was Catholic, and I've been, so I know what you're talking about. Exactly.
It's definitely putting that sacred moment at an elevated space consciously for everybody at that moment.
So those days of the year would have been very, very holy. People would have probably had a pilgrimage to the place, I think.
Absolutely.
Offerings, pilgrim. And if there was a death, that might have been another special kind of thing up there, another special thing that took place with people too. But with 57 alignments, they were probably, because some of them took place like the lunar ones, they only take place every 9 years for the minors and then 9 more years for the majors. But the other ones during the course of the year, they would have had at least eight different solar alignments, with the sun rising and set for the cross quarter and quarter days, and then the star alignments. Dr. Winkler from Penn State began working on the 24 star alignments we have back in 1997. And he retired, I think, in 1999 after over 35 years at Penn State as an astronomer, an archeo-astronomer. And he found, just before he died in 2001, unfortunately, he died suddenly. He was just wrapping that up. And so I have all his papers on like Taurus and Aldebaran and all Ceres and all the different star alignments that we have at our site. Well, he believes the site was built over 3 stages too, sort of like Stonehenge, but from 4,000 years ago up to about 1600 AD.
Yeah, kind of. And once again, if you look at those, and I've got the map up again with all the alignments going back to the center. If you look at those, it definitely shows a procession be it over time. I mean, we've got you for about another 8-9 minutes before we
Okay,
have to
boy, it
switch
went by
gears
fast.
to L.A. Marzulli.
Yeah, yeah,
Good times always go by fast, my friend.
they do.
And now, one question that I would have is, was this site possibly frequented by more than one local tribe?
Boy, that's a wonderful question. We don't have an answer for that yet. But these sites are all over the Northeast. There's 800 of them. And it's possible people came from a distance to the site, particularly we mentioned some of the astronomical events, because of the site is a little different than the other 800 sites, because again, it's like the Reader's Digest version. It's kind of special in that way. Everything all over the place here concentrated on about 110 acres, but I think people did come from distances. And the question is, who are these people? And was it generational? Was it a layering of different cultures that used the site? We're still not sure about that. So for the audience, we don't have all the answers. It's still an open question. We don't have conclusive evidence of, who these people were, where they came from, or what happened to them. We just don't know. And then Native American involvement. They were here for 10,000 years. I can only imagine they were involved with it to some degree, or either 100% or less. That we just don't know,
Well, and
there is evidence of old world coming to the new world too, before Columbus. So that's the thing we look at too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's and we could spend a whole episode on the hypothesis of this being Templar connected.
You'd want to talk to Scott Walters about that too.
I will write that down.
Yeah, Scott's great. He was out here. He was out here a month ago. He drove all the way up from Minnie, and he was out visiting my wife and myself. And he comes out every year or every 6 months, but he's really more the expert of that whole. But I'm interested in it. I'm interested in it.
That's just it, though. If the local culture goes back 10,000 years, and structures like this are found up and down the East Coast, ranging from Nova Scotia all the way down. Quite literally, or at least down to the Carolinas, a little bit further than that, correct?
Right. I was just in South Carolina 2 months ago at my sister. I found some writings inside of a museum that was 1761 date and also 1571.
Yes.
And around all they talked about in those two pictures, it was a wonderful museum. The only thing they talked about in those two pictures, they didn't actually have the two rocks there, were those two historic dates, but there was letters on it. And my brother-in-law was with me. He goes, I think those are Greek. I said, those are Phoenician letters, because the Greek comes from the Phoenician, the Hebrew. I said, they don't even address it. And that's on two different pictures, two different stones in some counties right around.
Wow.
It's in the northern part of South Carolina.
Well,
they don't talk about those other letters at all. It's amazing.
With things like that, and especially like we were just saying, the native cultures, the way that they mixed, commingled, known trade between the tribes of Nova Scotia, the Carolinas, Massachusetts really would be almost a midway point.
Yeah, exactly. I think tribes
geographically, it would be almost a midway point. So if you were, that would be a trek of treks back in the day.
Yeah,
but known to happen. Known trading happened between the Algonquins up in Maine and the Indians down in Massachusetts. Same thing with the local Indians up in Nova Scotia and Massachusetts, stuff like that.
Absolutely.
So, if you were making that trek from perhaps the Carolinas to Nova Scotia, hey man, it may behoove you to stop midway and not only get a bearing, but maybe get an idea what part of the season you're in real quick.
Well, that's a good point. There are two Native American trails. I have a map of New Hampshire Native American trails, and one on the west side of us, very close to our site, is called the Pawtucket Native American or Indian Trail. I call it on the map. And on the other side of us, the Pentucket, and they're on both sides of us. And those trails just go off into throughout New Hampshire. They continue towards Maine, Canada, and then they head south into Massachusetts and beyond.
Yeah,
so I think you're kind of on the right way.
Well, precisely. It's one of those. Hey, even if you were late to the trade, and I'm just looking at this from a point of view of American history. Back in our Wild West days, we had like those pioneer camp days, where if you were a buffalo trader, hey man, you had 3 days to bring your stuff to the camp.
Right.
You
Yep.
know? And
That's
you
what
brought
happened up
all
here
your
too.
kill and everything
Yes.
else. Well, the problem
Yep.
is, what happens if you were halfway there, but man, by the time you would get there, it would be over? Is it time for you to turn back?
Right.
Have you kept track of that? 'Cause
Exactly.
this-
Yeah.
Having
So-
this little marker as a midway point and all these alignments may be a perfect way for any decent star navigator to be like, hey, man, we're about 1 week too late. We need to go ahead and head
Yeah.
back.
Right. Right. Because of the astronomy, they would know it. Exactly. Right. Yeah. We screwed up.
So, I mean,
Next year.
that's just one thought form to think about. But that
Yeah.
seems to me to be a very, especially if these people worked together, shared knowledge, shared, shared anything in that, right?
Well, we have a stone. We have a stone in our artifact display that our archaeologists identified because of her husband too. The geologist, that came from New York, so it was imported. So I think you're on the right track. People were bringing in, stone things, even implements and different types of stone, from different parts of the Northeast to trade.
Wow.
And that came from, if you drove, it's about 5 hours west of here in a car. Where it came from.
Well,
So.
yeah, and precisely. I mean, now take that 5 hours and do it on a horse.
Yeah, or
take
on
that
foot.
5 hours and be dragging a hand sled with goods behind you.
Yeah, I mean, or walking it, and it would have been a long way.
Exactly,
Yeah,
it would have been a major undertaking. So to have a waypoint in the middle, no different than a Stuckey's.
And we have the Mohawk Trail in Massachusetts. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole network of ancient roads. Plus, they use the water too, the rivers and stuff for transportation.
Could you just imagine if you were if your property was a Stone Age Stuckey's? That's
another show. I think we'll have to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great.
Well, I'm going to leave you with that thought. Thank you so much once again for coming on with such short notice with the solstice just happening. Like, I know you were up for close to 24 hours the other day with it being Father's Day, the alignment, everything
a lot
to
going
begin
on
with. So happy Father's Day to you.
Happy Father's Day to everybody and you too.
Absolutely. Before we let you go real quick, time for shameless self-promotion. Tell everybody where they can go to check everything out, Dennis.
Sure. They can go to our website, stonehengeusa.com. There's the email address there. There's a phone number. We also have on there a free app download. You can do a complete virtual tour of our site. It doesn't cost you anything, but you can do it from home. And if you come to our site, you can use that and walk around. It will talk to you. It has pictures and text. And we have a 12-minute video on our website too. And we're on Facebook and Instagram too. So, but we're open every day but Thanksgiving and Christmas. So we snowshoe in the winter, so we're here year-round pretty much. So, but thank you so much for having me on again. I totally enjoyed it.
Oh, absolutely. It was more than a pleasure. We actively have L.A. Marzulli on with us right now. How are you doing, L.A.?
I'm doing really good, and it's always great to hear Dennis's voice. Hi, Dennis.
Hey, L.A., nice to hear your voice too.
Absolutely.
What a surprise.
I figured I would let you two guys chat. It would be a perfect way to test the tech and make sure it was
Well, we got to
working.
talk anyway, so thank you so much. Nice to hear from you, LA.
Yeah, likewise. Always good.
Yeah.
Well, LA, thank you so much once again, Dennis. We will get back to you very, very soon.
No, thank you. Thank you, and have a great evening. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. So, L.A., how have you been doing since our last visit, good sir?
Let me ask you something. Is this just audio or is it...
audio only.
Just audio only. Okay, I'll turn off my camera.
That will give us some better bandwidth. That's always helpful.
Yeah, we just released a film. It's called Disclosure, The Coming Great Deception and the Luciferian Endgame. We just released it. We got about 82,000 views on our YouTube channel, and then other sites have picked it up. I know that Prophecy Watchers, I think, has about 60,000 hits on it. So, I mean, it's making the rounds, but it's amazing. You know, people are always chomping at the bit. Why don't you release this stuff for free, LA, blah, blah, blah. So we do, and the response is less than overwhelming. What can I tell you? But the reason why I made it for free, this is just too important. The information
Amen.
in that is just too important to charge for. So we're actually working on part 2, and hopefully we'll have that released in the fall sometime.
Well, I am excited. Like I told our mutual friend Michelle the other day, and it was just a random phone call between us. I think you had just been this last weekend on Coast to Coast AM talking about the same film, correct?
Correct. It was not yeah. It was a week ago yesterday.
Yeah.
A week ago was correct.
Exactly. And I'd seen it on social media, and I was like, my God, I got to go find this. And of course, the first place I went was to our videos page, because you kindly allowed us to embed your LA Marzulli channel on our page. So I went there, and it was absolutely phenomenal. The information that you give in that is great. Now, before we get into a clip real quick, just kind of the beginning of it, was this something that you already had in the works?
What happened was Richard Shaw and I did 11 films together in the Watchers series. Mm-hmm. And what's amazing, Watchers 7, a lot of what we covered there is now coming out in the mainstream media.
Yes, it is.
For instance, Robert Salas, who was at the Maelstrom Air Force Base, actually Maelstrom Intercontinental Ballistic Base. He had 10 missiles that went online when a UFO appeared over his command post. He was like 60 feet underground when this happened. And, he appears in our film, and we were the first production company that he actually went with. He had been offered all sorts of deals and didn't do it because they wouldn't give him editing rights. So we said, come on in. We'll show you the rough cut. If you want to change something, no worries. So we did. He didn't change anything, and that was the end of it. We were the first production company to actually interview him, and he was very emotional. He was very emotional.
That's beautiful, man.
Very, very emotional. So this is back Watchers 7. I mean, it's almost like maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So, it's old stuff. So Richard and I parted companies after 11 films. He wanted to get in the Torah codes and Raiders of the Lost Ark. He was actually looking for the Ark of the Covenant, literally. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, and spending time in Israel. And I was on the trail of a Nephilim, which led to basically I've done 9 films on my own. Yeah. The first film I did on my own after Richard and I parted company, and by the way, his anniversary was just a couple of days ago, which is very, very bizarre. So, yes, it's been 2 years since he passed away. Very untimely. Great friend. I miss him a lot. And he taught me everything I know about filmmaking. So I owe, a lot to Richard Shaw, the director of The Watchers. Yeah. But so I did this UFO film. It was my first film. I had a lot of footage, and it was my first time editing a feature film. It's like an hour and 37 minutes long. And there's just way too much information. And some of the people just drone on forever. So I kind of wanted to get back and re-edit it, because I've done 9 films now, and I've gotten better. I'm not patting myself on the back, but hopefully I've gotten better. And people who watch the first one and the 9th one go, yeah, you've gotten better. So, I mean, okay, I get that. There's always room for improvement. And as within any art, we learn every day, and we're always honing our craft. Always honing our craft.
Absolutely.
That's part of what we do. So I started to circle back on this thing for 2 reasons. The first and the most important was disclosure was happening. We get this in 2017, where Commander David Fravor on the Tucker Carlson show looks right at the camera. Tucker asks him a question: where do you think this tic-tac-shaped object was from? Tic-tac-shaped UFO was from, and wherever it was from, it was not from this Earth. Well, that's earth-shattering news. Hello, from Commander David Fravor, former F-18 pilot, who encountered a tic-tac-shaped UFO over the Pacific Ocean near San Diego. So that was like the nexus. I went, oh my gosh, this is really happening. But that's 17. Now it's 21. And I kept doing On the Trail of a Nephilim. Meanwhile, I had all these other interviews I had done with which is going to become part 2 of the whole UFO thing. So I said, I'm going to go back and redo this and release it for free. And actually, the impetus of that was my good friend, Dr. Mark Kahn. And Mark was saying, LA, why don't you just release the film for free and see what it does? I go, Mark, great idea.
Yeah.
So that was it. And I got back and looked at the film and began the editing process, the re-editing process, which took, people have no idea the amount of work that goes into these things. They just have no clue.
Oh, yeah.
And it was I would say it's 2 months worth of work, steady work every day.
Yep.
Steady work. Before it was, and there's a lot of new music, a lot of new footage, and we're actually working on part 2. And I'll be honest with you, I'm overwhelmed because there's so much information in part 2. I almost have brain freeze. It's like, how do I edit this thing?
Well, there's so much information in part 1, and before we go any deeper with any hypotheses that you may have with the disclosure coming up on the 25th, which I definitely want to get into, my friend. Like your brain and your mind on these things is so sharp.
Thank you.
And I think you have a totally different concept than what a lot of people out there right now, that like I've been saying on our group and on this show for smooth since they've said there will be a report coming out, is just don't swallow the lure. Watch the lure, enjoy the show, enjoy watching other people bite. But man, don't bite and go under the boat, dude, because it may not be what you think. And before we get into that real quick, LA, I do want to play the intro, the first minute of UFO Disclosure, The Great Coming Deception, and Luciferian Endgame, because I really think nobody can sum this up better than you in this 1 minute of video.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
UFO Disclosure, The Coming Great Deception, and the Luciferian Endgame. I shot the footage in 2016, and we edited it and released the film in 2017. Of December of that year, 2017, on Tucker Carlson's show, he had a guest on, Commander David Fravor, who was a former F-18 fighter pilot. Fravor had an encounter over the Pacific Ocean with a tic-tac shaped UFO. Tucker asked Commander David Fravor, in your own words, what do you think this was? Fravor looked right at the camera and said, whatever this was not of this earth. One, that's a groundbreaking statement. We've never heard anything like that before, especially on the mainstream media, as it were. Since then, our government has stated on the record that UFOs or UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, are real. Folks, what are we to make of this? The reason I circled back and re-edited this film is I believe that disclosure is now being rolled out. We see it month after month after month. The purpose of this film is to arm you with what I believe is the truth, that these are not extraterrestrials from some other galaxy. They are in fact interdimensional entities that are messengers of deception. As you know, this film is for free. All I would ask is that you pass it forward. Share it with your loved ones, family members, your pastor. We are told, we are warned, in ancient prophetic texts, that men would faint from fear from what is coming upon the earth, that the dragon would come with all signs and lying wonders, that even the elect would be deceived if that were possible. What are we to make of those statements? They are dire warnings from thousands of years ago. I truly believe we are in a window of time that is unprecedented, unlike any other time in history. We are being told by our government that the UFO or UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon, is actually real, that we have in our possession off-world vehicles. In my opinion, when they really show up, when there's full disclosure, everything will change. However, these are not extraterrestrials from some faraway galaxy. They are, in my opinion, interdimensional entities that have a nefarious agenda. They are messengers of deception and masters of deceit. They lie and do so habitually. And I would ask you, who is the father of lies? In this film, you will see what I believe is incontrovertible evidence that the phenomenon is not only real, but it has a very dark side, a very nefarious agenda, which is why we call it The Coming Great Deception, and the Luciferian Endgame.
And once again, the amazing words of L.A. Marzulli himself. I mean, that's why I had to play that, because I don't think anybody put it as well. I've been trying to herald on my show as much as possible. Once again, don't swallow the lure. Don't go under the boat, little fishies. Is this saying that there is a technology that we are in possession of that goes beyond all else? Absolutely. But does that mean that it's aliens? No. I almost fall into the Project Bluebeam camp, which is where a lot of people forget that, and this isn't like a declassified government document. This is actually somebody's thought form that came out years ago, but is an interesting thought form where there will be a mass hallucination by people, and those who are religious believers, it will be the second coming. And those who are not, it will be from out of this world. And the technology exists for us to project laser holograms. Like we got into that 2 weeks ago with Mike Turber, with, all of the like literal pods that are carried by airplanes to project plasma holograms to deflect missiles like chaff. Things that are fully visible. So, interesting concept that, and whenever I saw your video, it was like, my Lord, there's somebody else who is finally heralding the fact that, hey, maybe we need to pay attention because there might be something a little unfriendly going on, kind of hijacking the meme of society, so to speak.
Well, first of all, thanks so much for your kind words in regard to that monologue. That was unscripted. There was nothing
Brilliantly
written.
Said. That
was from the heart, and I've been doing this for decades. So yeah. It's my core. It's who I am. It's what I live with. It's what I walk in. And I've been warning about this literally for decades. Warning about it, and you can go back and read my books. The first one, which was published by Zondervan, which was 1999, but we started researching that in the 80s, and then it finally a novel, which was the first of a Nephilim trilogy. And in that book, the protagonist is called Johanan.
Yeah.
And Johanan basically comes up with that phrase, the coming great deception. That's where it first appeared, at least the first time I used it. Somebody else may have used it before them. I don't know, but that's where I used it in that very first book, 1999, when it was published. So, I mean, again, this is my core. This is who I am, what I study, what I've been into literally for decades. Yeah. You're right. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. Don't bite the lure. I think we're going to look, when the government finally comes out, we're going to see the Texas two-step. We'll have just enough information to keep people on the hook, as it were, but really not anything new. You'll notice that they run the same story over and over and over again, which is the Tic Tac UFO seen by Commander David Fravor. They also run the Robert Salas, which I just talked about a little earlier, with the missile silos and all that. We broke that story years ago. Yeah. It's old news, and yet now it's getting all this traction on all the like it was in the Sun and just all over the place, Yep. So they're rolling it out. It's a managed agenda.
Absolutely.
To see what people's reactions will be, and basically it's flatline. I mean, people are so ambivalent, either ambivalent or just asleep, and they really don't give a flip. I don't know which it is. I'm taken aback by it because
same.
This is life-changing, folks. When they show up, and you talked about Project Bluebeam, and I know that Stephen Greer is big on that and has been banging that drum forever.
Years.
Well, years. I get that, Steve, and that might be part of it. The problem I have is in Greer's world, as far as I know, and I've never sat down with them, it's a very truncated view. He doesn't bring to bear a bunch of different aspects,
Sure.
several different aspects of the phenomena, which are people are taken, sperm is taken from the men, ovum is taken from the women. When women they find themselves pregnant, they're reabducted, usually at the end of the first trimester, and they think they've miscarried, but they're troubled. Sure enough, 4 or 5 years later, they're reabducted, and they're presented with a alien human-looking hybrid that looks very sickly. Now, this is in the 90s. It's gotten way better than that for them. So the hybrid now can pass as human. Dr. David Jacobs' book, Walking Amongst Us, the last book before his untimely, not demise, but he's not doing well. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Decline, better word. And that was his last book, and I completely concur. They are walking amongst us. They are here. We show this in the film where Al Matthews has an encounter with a woman who can only be described as a hybrid entity. This is ongoing. So you've got hybrids, then you've got the implants. I remember when I first started talking about it, I was laughed at by other people, other researchers. There's no such thing. Well, we show this in the film in our Watcher series where we actually trace Dr. Roger Lear's protocol with a man who has been implanted, who thinks he's been implanted, X-rays, CAT scans, Gauss meter, the whole 9 yards. And we finally go to Dr. Matriciana's and do an ultrasound, and we wind up taking the implant out. That's all in Watchers 8, once again with the late and great friend of mine, Richard Shaw, the director and co-producer of the Watchers series. But it's on film. We're the only Christian team that's ever done anything close to that. And Dr. Roger Lear took out 17 of them. Interestingly enough, there's a film on Netflix called Patient Number 17.
Yep.
We paid for the opera. We paid for everything.
Wow.
And the producer of that film took our footage. Richard gave it to him. He was supposed to give us credit, never did, and the rest is history. So
Wow.
his film gets on Netflix. Of course, our film isn't. There is a bias. There's a prejudice.
Absolutely.
Anybody who has a Christian worldview is ostracized
Yes.
in academia and the scientific community on certain platforms, and on it goes. But somehow I'm the fascist. I'm the racist. I'm all the things that they actually are. It's unbelievable.
Well, and with that downcasting in mind, because it is such a horrible fact. So, and I mean, even people that are researching things like you are into the skeletons hidden by the Smithsonian, into the Paracas skulls, things like that. The poo-poo of that kind of research by mainstream archaeology and science is insane. Like, to the point of religious zealots defending themselves insane. Where it's like, hey, and I make the point in our group all the time on Facebook, where it's like, if there's a 10% deviation in something, you really need to pull and start researching that 10%. Like, if there was a 10% failure in the brake lines of a vehicle, I bet you'd see a recall. You know what I mean? So it's like, if you're talking about crop circles where 10% of them are not fake, known not to be fake, have crazy nodes, have generations of crops affected in that area. The Paracas skulls, where maybe 70-80% of them might be deformed by false means, but the other percentage of them have totally different, like, sagittal sutures and the way that the skull grows, and just this idea of almost religious zealousness when it comes to somebody challenging the thought form. And
well, interestingly enough, Chief Joseph Riverwind, who's been on our On the Trail of a Nephilim series, I think he's in 2, 3, and 4, or 1, 2, and 3, whatever. But Chief is a good friend. We've been on the Trail adventures together and wound up in all sorts of strange places. But he sent me an article by Chief by this Ohio mound group talking about the Serpent Mound. And Chief Wallace was going on and on and on about how the Serpent Mound is Shawnee and all this stuff. Well, in the film, this is years ago, several years ago now, Chief Wallace, we have a quote from her saying that the Shawnee did not build the Serpent Mound, but always took care of it. So now everything is flipped, what's going on there, and the chief and I are going to try to get to the bottom of why this article is what it is. So once again, it's a managed agenda. Anybody who talks about aliens or anything else, is completely sidetracked. And here's the deal, and I want us to stay on course with the film disclosure, but real quickly, it's like we're led to, and I show this in episodes 1, 2, and 3 of On the Trail of the Nephilim, the mysterious mound builders, mathematical mysteries of the mound builders. So let's just go to one place. We'll go to the Octagon Mound. It's in Ohio. It's part of the greatest earthworks on the planet called the Newark Earthworks, all right? The Octagon Mound encompasses about 50 acres of land. So it's not this little octagon mound. It's huge. It's 50 acres. In fact, a person can really only see it when he's way up in the air, all right? So right off there, we've got some problems. But then the octagon isn't in eight sides that are equal. It's an irregular octagon. 2 sides are unequal, okay? So now you've got complex geometry. Yeah. I sat down with the mathematician Dorothy Isley, and she is it appears in the film. And basically, in order to do something like this on paper, you need to know geometry. You need to be able to measure angles. You need to use a compass, a square, and a ruler. And without those 3 implements, good luck. Good luck. You're not going to do it because the angles have to be precise, which is where your compass and your ruler and all these different things, and you have to know geometry. So here we've got, and you can do that on a piece of paper, and I get that. But even then, you still have to have those implements, and you have to know geometry. Otherwise, you wind up with a mess. You just can't draw it out. You need to know geometry, and you need to know the angles that make up an octagon, and then you need to know the irregular. You need to know all this. So it's one thing to draw it on paper, which is, by the way, no easy task. I challenge your audience to take a paper and a pencil and a ruler and just draw an octagon. 8 sides. Good luck with that.
Try just drawing a circle without aid of a string and an anchor point.
Bingo. It's difficult. So here's the deal. We are looking at advanced geometry encompassing 50 acres of land, and it's totally right on. And it corresponds to the 18-and-a-half-year lunar cycle. Native Americans did not have either of those particular disciplines in their teepees. They didn't have it. It's not there. It didn't exist. They didn't know about the 18-and-a-half-year cycle, and they didn't know geometry. End of story. So and I'm saying all that because there's an agenda, and anybody who goes against it and goes, wait a minute, show me where Native Americans had this. Yes. Oh, they just forgot the geometry. Oh, really? I doubt
10,000 years of spoken history, that's what they forgot.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
And I've actually got the map of Newark Earthworks from Ohio up right now. And right down the road from that same octagon that you're talking about is literally a perfect parallelogram.
Yeah, it's the Octagon Mound is just, I've been there several times. Obviously, we filmed there. It's just incredible. And when you're in it, you don't know what you're looking at. You really don't know.
We've got you for about another 30 minutes, and it's interesting to me literally the case that you quoted a minute ago, because I pulled 2 clips today after watching your documentary twice. I went back and I screenshotted 2 clips. Number 1 was the intro, because like I said, I don't think anybody could lay out that thought form in that way in a minute. Like literally, I've got it. It's like a minute and 20 seconds. It's beautifully said, LA. But in addition to that, after watching it the second time, I was like, out of everything, which clip would LA want to play? And I pulled the exact one that you're talking about. So I literally want to play that because there's a part that this testimonial brings about that I'm talking about, where that connection between religious and UFO is made, and kind of that handshake happens. And I think that's kind of the thought form that a lot of people have not really considered about what is going on right now, about something that we talk about with Dr. John Hall with all the time, a beautiful means of control, a means of control that is already inlaid, already there. All you're doing is taking advantage of it. So I want to play that clip real quick.
Go for it.
And it had to do with this woman who basically changed her appearance right in front of you. Tell us about that.
That was mind-blowing. That was in 2008, September. I'll always remember that. I was working for Williams Moving and Storage for their overseas division. We had a container coming in from Kuwait. The lady's name was Diane Kelly. I met her with one of my employees. I brought him along to give a hand. He had heard all my stories, and he didn't diss me. He said, you know, I've heard strange stuff like this. My parents know about it. He didn't make fun of me or anything like that. And anyway, we met this woman. She showed up in her car. I said, hi, I'm Al. This is so-and-so. We're here to unload your container. Welcome to Canada. Shook her hand. And I noticed she was a very pretty lady, well-dressed. She was wearing the weirdest glasses I've ever seen in my life. They were just like off the charts. I'm like,
How so? What do they look like?
they were black and wrapped around. Okay. So it would cover the side of her eyes so no sun would get in.
Okay.
So I sort of figured, oh, maybe she has an eye problem or something.
Sure.
But anyway, we moved on from there. The conversation went this way. I said, for some reason, it was September, the rainy season's coming in Vancouver, and I was just making simple conversation. I said, why are you moving from Kuwait? It's so nice over there now, the war's over, and you know, you're coming back here. And she goes, she changed totally. She goes, there's gonna be another war, another war. And for some reason I said, well, don't you believe in a higher power? I don't know why I said that, but that's what I said. And she looked at me and she goes, what do you mean, Al? UFOs? And I'm like, what?
So out of the blue, she just
said that.
That's the clip right there. That when and like I said, I watched this documentary twice today. After everything was confirmed between us with Michelle and everything else, and she sent me the link to everything. I was like, thank God I get to watch all of it. And man, such an incredible outlay, LA. And once again, this is just this gentleman's testimony, but to have somebody saying that is what an entity told them, was that there would be a link between that and religion. That is the bridge that would be built.
Yeah, I mean, it gets better as the film progresses.
For
absolutely. For me, the one that just blew me away was this woman who remains anonymous. We pixelated her face. I spoke to her a couple of weekends ago, and actually prayed with her over the phone. She is a psychic, New Age philosophy. She was out looking for all sorts of stuff, and she was out in a tent by herself, camping. In the middle of the night, she wakes up in the tent. It's like this, engulfed in this huge wind. She goes out, and there's a giant UFO directly over the tent, probably about 60 feet in the air. You know, and this thing's probably about 80 feet wide, something like that. And she's directly underneath it, and it's lighting up the whole area. And she's by herself. And next thing you know, she wakes up in the morning in the tent. She's got missing time, obviously. There are 2 puncture marks in her neck, and she has a cough.
Yeah.
And this happened to her in 2004, And she told me the story in 2016. And when she told me that, I just went, well, there's no way I can use this. I'm thinking to myself, I mean, this is really way too far out. And I just, it's great. I'm glad she believes this, but I can't use it. So in redoing the film, I'm previewing different clips.
Wow.
And and I play the first one, and I say, well, I'll use that with Billy Crone's testimony. That will be perfect. So I do a little clip, maybe about a minute long. He talks about channeling and information and contact with these alien entities through channeling and remote viewing.
Yeah,
perfect.
Yeah.
I wanted. Other side of the aisle, talking about channeling and remote viewing, Billy Crone saying, no, you can't go there because you're contacting entities that have a nefarious agenda. So there's another clip which I didn't remember, and I click it on, and I'm just kind of cruising and listening to it, and she starts off, the powers that be, and she explains who the powers that be. If you listen to the whole testimony, she's talking about the entities that appeared to her in that craft, and she was taken aboard. The powers that be are saying that they're going to create some kind of a plague, and everyone's going to have to get vaccinated. It's going to be a global vaccination. Now, she's saying this in 2016.
Wow.
She got the doubt in 2004. And here we are in 2021. When I heard that, I about fell out of my chair. I was just totally blown away. And we use that in the film to show, and I basically look at the camera and go, how did she know that? And this is why we call it the coming great deception of a Luciferian endgame. Make no mistake about it. There are powers that be on this planet that are in league with them absolutely all day long. And this is why it's a nefarious agenda.
I would love to use a word other than amen at that moment. LA, I can't. Like, as somebody who is a seminary student and spent 3/4 of my life studying world religion and philosophy and trying to be that, quote, enlightened Renaissance man. Like, no way, man. No way. I can't in good conscience not share things like what you're sharing. I can't in good conscience not invite my audience to start sifting through what they see and start sifting through programs that have been, like, a year ago we talked about the technology that they could shoot an equivalent size craft as a plasma hologram from a moving aircraft. It was like holographic chaff, where they could make something that was hotter than their aircraft and bigger than their aircraft and moving faster so that the missile would go to that. And it's
there's no doubt in my mind that they have a technology. We actually interviewed someone on the show, Paul McGuire, and McGuire based about Project Bluebeam and the possibility of that. So it's not either or, it's both and. We've got that kind of technology. We've got that kind of technology. We can manipulate all that. I get that. But then you've got the stuff that, it's just people, pilots encounter a tic-tac shaped object that are not holographic projections, the stuff that's, out there buzzing airports and everything else. There was one over Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
Fairly recently, a couple of days ago.
Yep.
My inbox lights up now with all of our friends of the show that are constantly sending me clips, which is just fantastic. So, we get a lot of good stuff, and it's there. The bottom line is something is going on. And again, the holographs can't account for the decades of calamizations, abductions, implants, hybrids. And, we've had people reporting seeing hybrids and having encounters with them. And I never want to see one. I absolutely never want to see one. There's no doubt in my mind. But, we get them from time to time.
Well, and that's a lot of what we've been saying is the fact of all these things combined makes for an excellent means of, quote, panic control. where you can create a panic within certain communities, where you can create a kerfuffle, so to speak, and kind of control that kerfuffle, you know? Especially with modern day algorithms. Like, people forget the fact that whenever you're taking fun little quizzes and things like that, even within our communities, even within our shared communities of the paranormal, the extraneous that mainstream media doesn't cover, folks, you got to remember that taking all those little surveys and everything else, that is the product being sold. So, man, you know, the means of control at that point, the nefarious means of control that can be used and utilized at that point is mind-numbing, LA. Even when you're talking about from the religious perspective, and this is somebody like, I know we didn't get into it in your last episode that you were on, but my audience knows I spent my first year in college as a Roman Catholic seminarian. I spent years teaching church history, religion, all kinds of things. So, like, it's been my life study and work to read the world religious texts and see these things, and even to see it within my own church, where it's like, wow, the utter suppression of even thought form. Like, I can't even grasp the thought form of you telling me to believe in something ethereal outside of this physical world than telling me that a ghost doesn't exist. Like, I can't even get past that leap of freaking logic, dude.
Yeah.
And I have a complete and utter connection with my God on the capital G universal on a daily basis. So it's one of those that's like, wow, once again, to see the options on table for a means of control right now is so utterly frightening on so many levels to me.
Well, it is. And this is why the coming Great Deception, Luciferian Endgame, is the subtitle. Because when disclosure happens, that is the coming Great Deception. When they show up, they will tell us this, that they created all life on this planet. They genetically manipulated early man. They started the world's civilizations and the world's religions. Now at this critical juncture in human history, they, ET, are back to usher mankind into a golden age. Now, I heard this literally, and I'm not making this up, about 45 years ago. I heard that I was a New Age guy. I had just come out of living with a guru for 3 years in the ashram. I didn't want anything to do with it. I was completely agnostic at that point. And this guy was a born-again, spirit-filled Christian. And he was telling me this stuff 45 years ago.
Wow.
And I looked at him like he had 3 heads. He was way ahead of his time.
Yeah.
And John Marty, he's no longer with us. I said, John, that's crazy. But that's where it's going to be. That's what they're going to do. They're already setting things up for it. And that's where we are. We've already had the dry run with the COVID lockdowns. So we watched draconian laws enacted. People, and who's doing this? The only way the government can actually implement something is if they have the military behind them. If the military stands down and goes, we're not doing this anymore, then the 1,000 people that are running whatever country they're running aren't running anything anymore. The military will step in. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen here or anywhere else, but the problem is we've already seen the draconian measures that our government enacted. And my gosh, Canada, they're still in lockdown for crying out.
Yep.
Still in lockdown. So, welcome to a new world order. And the people don't do anything. In fact, the pastor up there over the weekend held a church service, helicopter flying around in the woods, and they arrest him. I mean, can you even believe this crap? I mean, it's like, it's so Stalin-esque, it's unbelievable. We're being censored on all sorts of social media, YouTube, the whole 9 yards. And free speech is no longer, it's the speech that we want you to say. You are not allowed to talk about this, that, and the other thing. Well, screw you, pal. If you deplatform me, that's fine. I'll go to some other platform. I will not be silenced. I will not go quietly. End the story. People need to know the truth. And when they show up, everything will change instantaneously. And the thing that people need to understand, I'm reading a book that a friend of mine gave me. It's called Sapiens, and it's from a Darwinist, an ardent Darwinist, who believes in the whole evolutionary paradigm, and that's his opinion. But it's just hysterical as he goes, billions of years ago, the Big Bang happened. Well, that's theory. You don't know that. You think that happened, but where did the Big Bang come from? And who set that thing in motion? Oh, we don't have an answer for that. Okay, shut up and sit down. Quit telling me to drink the Kool-Aid. Then he goes about, I forget what it is, like 2 million years ago or some ridiculous thing, an ape gave birth to 2 chimpanzees. One chimpanzee or 2 females. Yeah. It's a chimpanzee. The other one was our great-great-great-great-grandmother. Well, you don't know that. That's all speculation. And we don't even know, it's so funny to hear him talk about the way evolution and natural selection works, like it somehow has a mind of its own. Natural selection has a mind of its own. No, it has no mind of its own. Survival of the fittest. I mean, it's Kool-Aid all day long, in my opinion. But to the Darwinists, this is what they believe. And so I always go back to, let me get this straight. We've got the reproduction system. Let's just go there and stop there. So the reproduction system between a male and a female is incredibly complex. And that DNA in the sperm, where does that come from? And it's intact. How does that work? And when that sperm meets an egg and penetrates the egg, there's an explosion and creation happens. That's life. And the DNA begins to create this complex code, which is called DNA, creates whatever it is that sperm and egg match to.
And responding to its external environment and multiplying cellularly and, doing those scientific things.
It's mind-boggling because there's someone who put that DNA, who created that DNA. But Darwinists know the jig is up. So they're looking out there for our progenitors. So when they show up here, look, why would Barack Hussein Obama, what was it, 3 weeks ago? He says this, that, when they finally show up, when the aliens reveal themselves, there's going to be new religions. That's the first thing out of his mouth. There's going to be new religions. Well, wait a minute. How do you know that? Why are you telling us there's going to be new religions? Once again, the coming great deception. This dovetails into the book of Revelation, found in our Bibles, the guidebook of the supernatural, in ways that just blow my mind. Here you got this ex-president saying there's going to be new religions. You're right, because the Bible tells us there's going to be a one-world global religion at the time of the Antichrist. And the late Dr. Chuck used to say that the Antichrist may boast some sort of an alien connection. So I'm not making this stuff up. I mean, I'm not making it up. It's there and it's happening. And people need to wake up and understand that it's not coming, it's here and it's unfolding even as we speak.
As you were speaking a minute ago, I just brought it up on screen for everybody. You and your quest for truth and enlightenment in the capital E, capital U, universal sense, L.A., remind me of the poem Tiger by William Blake. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what a mortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand, what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain, and what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what the grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? Like literally, I don't know why that popped into my head, but it was one of those like, this is what he's trying to say. This is what he's trying to bring to light. Is the fact that this is there. Like, people like you have been trying to shoot red flares into the sky for years. L.A. Like not even throwing up flags of warning, like shooting flares while you ride brilliant steeds of, hey, pay attention, this may be happening. So I think that poem brilliantly describes your passion behind this topic, and your literal recent revelation of the impact of this topic. Not that you haven't been researching things like Nephilim and their impact on the world around us and that continued thought form in the world around us. Everything else, literally for decades. Like, I've been listening to you on shows like Coast to Coast since I've been listening to shows like Coast to Coast, which is like 25 plus years, man. So your work is vast, it's huge, it's voluminous. But the fact that that concept is just now coming around to echo in the halls of society is phenomenal to me. And the fact that people like you have been unwavering, more than steadfast in your belief about what is happening, what is coming, what's even coming down the line right now, literally 3 days from now, that document is due. So, just a question, because we do have you for like another 15 minutes almost. It just, God, man, the minute clock just turned. So, what do you see coming down the pipeline 3 days from now? Not just as religious revelation in that right, but societally. What do you see happening from this revelatory document coming from our U.S. government and entities thereof?
Well, I would like to hope that they're going to come clean, but they more than likely won't.
Yeah.
It'll be sort of Texas two-step. There'll be just enough to keep people moving along.
Yep.
But nothing to, let's put it this way. I don't think they're going to show us film from the Roswell crash where they're carting off the bodies. I don't think we're going to see anything like that. They may show us some very good pictures, better than the goofy tic-tac shaped ones, which are still really good. Misunderstand me, but they may have some really cool pictures. Let's hope we see some of that. They may come clean with some of the back engineering that they've done. I would, but again, they're not going to give us the goods. They're going to say we've been able to back engineer certain things, which are top secret, and we can't do it because of national security reasons, which is a big basket that everything is kept in, and that's how they can redact basically the entire page.
Exactly.
If they just say national security and that's it. So it's going to be a Texas two-step. They'll give just enough to try to assuage Congress's curiosity, as it were, but nothing revelatory. On the other hand, you see, and I wrote about this years ago, when Roswell happened in '47, and I believe that it was we have too many witnesses that I've spoken to one-on-one.
Oh, it definitely happened.
Yeah.
The incidences stated by most witnesses definitely happened.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. And those who think it's a weather balloon are selling you a bridge someplace.
It's like saying Waco didn't happen the way we know it unfolded.
Yeah,
literally.
It's
quite literally.
Yeah. Stop drinking the Kool-Aid, will you? So, the bottom line is, when Roswell happened, you had this group of people in basically the shadow government, and they're running everything behind the scenes. And at that point, they were still in league with the president and Congress on some level. But after Eisenhower, after Dallas, everything changed. Okay, everything changed. But these people, along with Eisenhower, put the kibosh on the Roswell crash and ran the weather balloon story. Why? Because they knew about War of the Worlds, and they said, American public is going to freak out, can't do this. It's gonna cause mass panic, and it'll destabilize the country.
Yeah.
So for the next 70 years plus, they've been running this campaign, Star Trek, Star Wars, numerous, too many to count. It's actually in my book. I listed all the TV shows and films that deal with the whole alien deal, and it's just page after page after page. Not to fill up pages of the book, but to show that there's a concerted effort to basically get everybody used to the idea.
My life of beloved movies would literally not exist. L.A. I'm 45. Like my entire childhood, other than Indiana Jones, would just be wiped off.
That's my point. So the old guard is now dead. When they were in power, let's say they were in their 40s and 50s, so that's in 47. Well, the old guard is pretty much gone. I would say 100% gone by this time. So the new people have come in. They've been trained by the old guard, but they're going, no, it's time. We can't hold this thing forever. And that's why in 2017, they started rolling it out. And since then, it's been a steady rollout. And at some point, they're going to come clean on Roswell. At some point. And there'll be a mea culpa, and they'll try out some, general, whatever. Yeah. I mean, some spokes guy will come out. Well, look, I talked to Jesse Marcel Jr. before he died. It's a handwritten. It's actually the article or the interview is republished in my book, Disclosure: The Coming Great Deception. It's in the book, not the film, but it's there, and it's a riveting interview. He handled the wreckage. I mean, it's as close to the event as you can. His father was the guy that was the first guy, other than Mac Brazel, to see it and to handle it.
Yep.
Why would he wake up his wife at 2:30 in the morning and his son and show them, handle this material, you'll never see it again. This came from another world.
Yeah.
That's
make it a point to wake you up.
Exactly. He knew what a weather balloon was. He saw them every single day as the base's intelligence officer. To try to pin the idea, the ludicrous idea that Marcel Sr. would mistake a weather balloon for a UFO is absolutely insulting to the man's intelligence and who he was as an intelligence officer.
His career as a trained observer, literally millions of dollars, even at that day and time, millions of dollars put into his training as years of a trained observer and intelligence officer.
I mean, it's the height of absurdity. And that was, but you tell the lie often enough. And I remember these two guys who came out with a film a while back that insisted that Roswell was a weather balloon. And I just looked at Richard Shaw and I watched it together in the theater. And the next day we gave it 2 thumbs up because we were nice people. We could have ripped the thing to shreds and we didn't. We just gave it 2 thumbs up. And we said, great film, way to go, guys. Glad you got a national exposure with it. But Rick and I have a different opinion, and this is what we think. And that's what we did. In other words, we weren't going to bash their film. That's fine. Who cares, right?
Well, there's no need to. And the question is, if their film leads people to looking into the situation, if it leads people to exploring that situation, period, is it something that you should poo-poo and put to the side? Or is it something that you should at least give some credence to within the community?
Which is why we gave it 2 thumbs up and we said, bully for you guys for getting national exposure. Yeah. And we took the high road. But we gave our opinion and we talked about Roswell. And I've never backed down for that. Roswell was the real deal. I've got 2 witnesses, not only Jesse Marcel Jr., but we had a deathbed confession from Colonel Hill, which we actually showed in the film. But
the president of the Chinese Communist Party in 1999, Jiang Zemin, he created a 610 office, a Gestapo-type office on June 10th, 1999, 1 month before the complete ban of Falun Gong that happened on July 20th of 1999. And this Gestapo-type agency system, economic, social, and political system, for one directive and one directive only, to eradicate Falun Gong, declare war on it, and exterminate these people for their organs. Wow. Everything in Chinese society is tied to Falun Gong in one way or another, because it became the life force of China. And that is why people are like, well, what has it got to do with me, Mitch? I'm a million miles away. I got my family to deal with. My business is falling apart. I'm stressed out. What has it got to do with me? Well, look at your stress levels. Look at why your businesses are falling apart. Look at why billions of dollars have been lost. Your 401ks are being drained. The CCP, the bioweapon.
Even aside from that, it's the straight lack of empathy worldwide for our common man.
Yes,
it's the fact of when you watch that video at the UN, one of the first shots is a wide shot of the room, and you see the speakers, and it's horrifying how few people are in the room for that testimony. Horrifying.
Yeah. I know.
In something so major. And we have 2 more clips, and you're one of the few guests, Mitchell, that I insist on playing all these clips, because I think it's hugely important for people to grasp the scope of this. And in addition to that, I think that they're hugely impactful clips that really show the scope of this beyond any reporting that you may see that pops up spuriously, like I told you in my email, and like I told Michelle in our private conversation. These things have been popping up. Things like Biden saying, like, "Bah, it's just cultural differences," you know. Yeah, okay, I guess that what happened, like, back in Alabama back in the 20s was they were just cultural differences. You know, it wasn't a direct persecution of a directed people, you know, and this isn't a direct persecution of a directed people, which it is. And the next clip that I want to play, which would leave us 2 clips out here from all of them that you provide, which are crazily impactful, Mitchell. And the fact that most of the websites that you have been on have literally been banned from the internet. Most of the interview links that you have hated now. It's horrifying.
I know.
It's horrifying. I know. We're one of the few, and like I said, I think it's because of the name Dudes and Beer that we've flown under the radar with a lot of these things and a lot of guests like you, man. But quite literally, when I play this next clip, I want people to think about that worldwide impact, that concept of what you were just saying, Mitchell, where how can I make a difference? What can me even knowing anything about this make a difference? And this next clip is called The World Needs to Know.
Crimes in history began taking place in hospitals throughout the country as organ transplants suddenly began to skyrocket.
We've been asked to investigate allegations that there has been harvesting of organs of Falun Gong in China. Our bottom line conclusion, after considering everything as best we could, was that the allegations are true.
I began conducting comprehensive interviews with medical professionals, Chinese law enforcement personnel, and over 50 refugees from the Laogai system. But I estimate that 65,000 Falun Gong were murdered for their organs from 2000 to 2008.
Essentially what organ harvesting means is they're taking Falun Gong practitioners literally like cattle, holding them in prison camps, testing their blood and other vital organs, and when someone comes into the country that needs a heart, a liver, a kidney, they find a match, they take the Falun Gong practitioner, extract their organs, of course killing them in the process.
people who are
While they're
expecting this
alive, by the way.
to sort of just be solved naturally by all we have to do is sit back and they'll fix it, this is wrong. The West has to take a role. And the one role the West can do is say, these are our values. We cannot go beyond this. There are certain lines we can't cross. This is a red line. That's an absolute red line.
Enver Tohti, the surgeon turned bus driver, says it's been 20 years since he removed the organs from that live prisoner. It remains a mystery why so few people have ever heard about the thing he says he cannot forget.
This is my experience. This is a real true story. If you keep silence, this tragedy will continue. And people, they just don't want to touch this evil. Because if you touch this evil, maybe at the end of the day, you may not be able to tackle this, the consequences. That is my guess.
And that's where things, once again, really, really, really hit that personal level, Mitch, where, how can we, once we know something, start to make a difference? How can we, much like you, sans having a podcast, sans having a reach, sans having episodes that are banned, much like your interviews, how can we as people and individuals start shooting these flares up day and night? How can we start making people aware? How can we start activating our, I guess, local outreach just of knowledge, thrumming the webs of society, so to speak?
Yeah, Chris, I know it's very difficult. We cannot go to war with China. It would be a nuclear holocaust.
Good God, yeah. My God, I don't care what joined armies we have. Just even if it was man to man, they would march over us.
Oh, at this time, yeah. Especially with all this radical cancel culture. I don't know if you saw the other day, there were 3 army recruitment videos, one from Russia, one from China, and one from the US. Did you see our, when you see the Chinese army recruitment video versus the Russian versus the American, it was embarrassing. It was truly embarrassing.
I'm sure ours looks like some kind of twisted YMCA camp video.
God, you have to see it, please. Type in
for the next episode, folks. I'm going to find all 3 of those and back to back them.
Please.
Just for
Army
you,
recruitment videos. Exactly. Chinese, the Russian, and the American. After this, go take a look. You'll be shocked.
And it's interesting that you bring that up, because one of the things that I was looking at earlier was quite literally the Russian response to these allegations.
Yeah. I wish we could do more. This has been going on for 21 years. The investigative journalists, the amount of evidence that is out there, you see it. The documentaries, what your audience can do, basically, what I would suggest, and I know it's not a lot, but just to read the reports. If anyone that is listening is a lawyer or a professor, I appeal to the professors who have their students, watch the documentary Hard to Believe. It's a documentary online. We just watched a couple of clips from them. Hard to Believe, if you go to YouTube, it's a free documentary. Hard to Believe documentary, yeah. You can watch it, 54 minutes. It's been released on, that's it. It's on Swoop Films. And there you are. You can just watch it there. Free of charge. That's the doctor who I'm actually going on a big talk show with him very soon. I would love to bring him next time on yours, Chris.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime you can have him, you let me know, and we'll make time for you, man.
I will, for sure. People can go to endtransplantabuse.org, endtransplantabuse.org, and the reports are all there, black and white. What I would suggest, yeah, that's great, Chris. And I'll just guide you through it.
Yeah.
If your listeners and your viewers would like to just go endtransplantabuse.org, all the reports, so this is the main work, all the investigative reports. If you just click on the investigative and reports tab, there's the China Tribunal judgment, the update, the slaughter from all the government reports, the academic articles, books, documentaries. And then when you go to take action and video on the right-hand side, you can take action, the webinars, donate, how can you help, student movements, the advocacy, signed petitions and letters. And the video section is also very profound. The Coalition Roundtable, if you click on that, well, explain the video is great, but if you type, the Coalition Roundtable, those are the 4-part series sharing from all the investigators Miss World Canada. I would highly recommend those.
Wow.
You can also go. All of it's there, black and white. You know, there are a lot of there are not a lot of trolls, but there are a certain amount of trolls that no matter what you say to them, they're not attack.
I would just love to be able to, and I don't know if you're connected with them technically or anything like that, but I would love to be able to embed the End Transplant Abuse YouTube channel on our videos page on Dudes and Beer and our sister website coming up, Curious Realm, just so that people have access to this stuff 24/7, man, as easy as possible.
Please do. You know, you're not copywriting it. It's just you're supporting the work and you're voicing support. It's amazing. So please do. There's another one called stoporganharvesting.org.
Yep.
That's more clear as well. That's a website. I don't own any of these websites, ladies and gentlemen. I just advocate for them because I'm more of a messenger. I know who I am, and I'm confident in who I am. But I'm a nobody. I just like to give my life to expose this, and this was created by a good friend of mine and long ago, and then he sent it off to some other people, but they've fixed up the website, and you can learn about what Falun Gong is.
Well,
it's great.
I mean, even since the last time that we've had you on, this website is entirely more responsive.
Yes.
and way better laid out. And kudos to them on that, and kudos to you to getting this information out there and really bringing this information to light to everybody.
Absolutely.
Let everybody know before we let you go here where they can go to find out more, where they can go to support, where they can go to even get involved locally or at a state, federal level in their area.
They could go to stoporganharvesting.org, and also if they want to learn more about Falun Gong, which is great as well, faluninfo.net. If you want to share one more,
sure.
I think I've got two more websites. This one and
absolutely.
It's one more. Falun Info, because a lot of people would like to know what Falun Gong is and how to practice it and where to practice it. It's an incredible website. Well done as well. What Falun Gong is, the 100 million people targeted and killed for their organs, and you can watch the videos, and it's fantastic. Now, the last one I would suggest is this is for the avid readers. This is for people who really want to read and learn, who love to watch documentaries or read. Yeah. If you type in, Chris, the communist specter is ruling our world. Communist specter. It's from the Epoch Times.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you know the Epoch Times.
Okay.
But a phenomenal editorial
I am familiar with it as much as my audience. So communist specter is ruling our times.
Ruling our world, yes. Communist specter is ruling our world, yes.
Oh, look
That's
at that.
it.
Hey, how about Google for liking what we're talking about? Isn't that creepy enough?
It's not Amazon, not Amazon.
Oh,
I
not
know, it is
Amazon.
creepy. Not Amazon, no. It's for free. Yeah,
Epoch
there we
Times
go.
right there.
It's great. And people can actually, it's a special TV series. You can
Okay.
just go down.
Ooh.
Or that's a special TV series. It's really, really good. Or you can just go scroll a little bit down, and people who want to read it or listen to it, they can also do it as well.
Oh,
That's
fantastic.
an amazing documentary publication and editorial series that will blow people's minds. Those are for the avid readers. It's a very heavy documentary, a lot of facts.
Yeah.
And the publication was released in 2008 and has actually led to the rebelling of at least 300 million Chinese people from the Chinese Communist Party, quitting all the affiliations and basically saying enough is enough after reading that. It's really opened the mind and shown the true face of communism and how the specter of communism is ruling our world, and why it has to, and this basically relates to people like, what has this got to do with me? I'm a million miles away from China. But as you've noticed, the cancel culture, does that ring a bell?
Oh,
the political correctness.
It's so incredibly. So, like, literally, we are rebranding this show. Rebranding this show from Dudes and Beer because, yeah, admittedly, we do something totally different than we did at the beginning of this show. But it's also the fact of just because of beer in our title, we can't even run an ad on Facebook to get more people to come join the conversation. Because beer is in our title. It's been canceled. It's been outed. It's out.
I wonder why. I wonder when these people sold out and for how much did they sell their souls for the devil's control. I'm not sure.
By the
way, Chris, forgive me for cutting you off.
No.
Did you see Roger Waters the other day at a press conference?
Dude. Oh my God, that is so creepy. I was just about to Google that exact article about Roger Waters refusing a mega amount of money to use another brick in the wall for a Facebook ad.
And do you know that Mark Zuckerberg allegedly is the grandson of the Rockefeller, of David Rockefeller?
Oh man, stop. You say these things, but it's so entirely true and it's creepy. It's out there.
That's why
I'd love to say it's not. I'd love to say it's not a fact.
That's why I preface this as alleged, because I don't want to confirm it unless it's not true, but I have my suspicions.
Well, and I mean, just the fact that you even thought about that right as I was literally getting ready to look it up, like, that is creepy. I posted it like 3 times, and a lot of people ask me why I post things numerous times to our Dudes and Beer group. It's validity. That's why. Because you should always look for at least 3 sources, people. 3 sources. If you don't have 3 sources backing up a story of independent thought, you may want to rethink that dialogue that you're having in your head real quick about the facts of a situation. So yeah, the fact that I have posted that 3 times over the last week, that Roger Waters has refused crazy money from Facebook, good on you for knowing that, man. So many people do not realize, like, I guess, just like you said, that prophetic engine of synchronicity that goes on in the world, whether it be somebody like Roger tapping into that mentality years ago, you know, that what came to be popularized in the 90s by Living Color as that, quote, cult of personality, you know, that has been shared by so many people that it tends to drive our humanity at some point. It tends to literally bring us to a point of not only unity on some ends, but utter conflagration on others. And it becomes a wedge of control. And it's really interesting to see how that almost Occam's razor of logic is used as that wedge of control. And how even now with the disclosure community, that it's become that you hear the word UFO denier almost being used interchangeably with the word conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's the dialogue that's going to be pushed if UFO denier is the dialogue that's being pushed?
Absolutely. It's great points. And that's why I'm grateful to be on your show, truly.
And I mean, even the same logic applies when it comes to Falun Gong, when it comes to people like the president saying, oh, those are cultural differences going on. I don't know. I guess back in the 40s, we didn't really, like, hey, 1930, what was it, 1938? That I had it up on screen earlier that Adolf Hitler was Time's Man of the Year.
It's unbelievable.
And like 2 years later, people were like, nah, no way. He's not shipping people via train to camps. You're a crazy person. He was the Man of the Year in Time.
Even my grandmother, who was Jewish at the time as well, God rest her soul, couldn't believe that the death camps were.
Yeah.
As I said to you, even the Supreme Court judge, Felix Frankfurter, couldn't believe that this is going on. It's so hard to believe, but it's going on.
Yeah.
And even when the evidence is presented, Chris, people will still not believe it. And I don't know what to say to these people. I think they should just remain silent, because if they're too lazy to read the evidence, too lazy to see what is going on, and you've got a lot of smart people, but if you do not discern from fact and fiction, then there's a problem.
Yeah.
There's a real problem. So thank you so much for letting me be on your show.
Oh,
really.
Hey, man, like I said, anytime and often. I want nothing more than to shine the light of day on issues like this, on the documentary Hard to Believe, which, hey, you may think it's hard to believe, folks. Like it didn't even take a shovel full of digging. Like we said last time you were on, this would be like what you would see on Curse of Oak Island, where they take like a trowel and go over the surface of the dirt and go, "Ooh, wow, look at that." That's exactly. Literally how hard you have to dig to prove this is fact. And that's disturbing. It's not even a shovel full of evidence. It's not even like a bucket full of doctors that have been discredited.
Chris, you don't know how many people I've been banging on the doors to say, let me in, just for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes, for just a 5-minute segment. Countless hours, from the right to the left to moderates. I don't care who you are. And I listen to their shows day in and day out, talking all this about how they care so much and how they're so sympathetic. No, my friend, you are the real deal. Your show, your audience, I'm honored to be on, because you really walk the walk. These so-called humanitarians and so-called hosts and anchors, and from the left to the right, that I've been pleading with, I've sent promo after promo, fact after fact, evidence after evidence, and they've denied it. They've stayed silent, and that's what I think is so sad, is that this is not about a right or left issue, a Democrat or Republican issue. This is a human issue, for God's sake. And just because I was on Alex Jones or on Tucker Carlson, not yet, but I was on Alex Jones or your show or other things, does not mean that I can't come on your show and on Rachel Maddow or on NBC or Fox. Who cares? This is human beings we're dealing with. This is slaughtering of innocents. And for you to remain silent and not speak up and not have someone on, that has risked it all. I'm a nobody, Chris. I have no titles. I don't belong to any government organization or intelligence unit, or I haven't even got military service under my belt. But what I have is the heart to stand for what is good and what is right. And with a little bit of money that I have, or a time that I have, and is beating hard in my chest, I've done what I could, sacrificed everything, put everything on the line to help expose evil and to stand up for good. And that is it. Regardless of whether it's part of my family or it's got nothing to do with me, I think it's important to stand for what is right. And you've done the same thing, and that's why birds of a feather stick together. And quite honestly, I've been really disheartened and brokenhearted by the lack of support and the complicitness and just the silence that has come out of these mainstream media hosts and these podcasters that's every day sit up there and preach goodness and happiness and health and doing the right thing, but yet but yet stay and remain silent. Yeah. And I'm not trying to disrespect anybody, okay? But this is, like you said, you don't have to dig up a lot of dirt to see this. It's on the surface now. Even Google is coming to the party. Not that even though they are complicit, you can still find it. Easy.
Yeah. Once again, it doesn't take an extreme amount of Google digging to find it.
Exactly.
Like I've found most of these things that you have seen pop up in real time tonight. In real time.
Yeah.
So like literally as you mention these things, I went and searched them and found them. And there they are. Like straight up where the Siberian court orders Falun Gong movement banned. That's same concept. It's out there. Go ahead.
For 10 years, for 15 years, since 2006, this investigation have been going on. All the reports. That's why we had to have our own media. That's why the Epoch Times came into existence, and New Tongue Dynasty Television came into existence, because of the overwhelming letdowns and the abandonment of humanity against these issues. And that's why, I would love to get on OAN. They haven't reported on it yet. I don't think they've reported on it. Fox did a little documentary, but man, I tell you, they know full well about it, and I haven't heard anybody, very few, mention it. That's why, Chris, I take my hat off to you. Yes, there are good journalists in I'm not going to call. There are a lot of fake news media out there, but there are certain CNN reporters, there are certain Fox reporters, NBC reporters, Washington Times reporters, New York Times reporters, on the left and the right, that have had the courage to speak up against it. I will give them kudos. Sure. But for the majority of reporters and podcasters out there, come on, guys. Where's the courage and heart that you are exemplifying right now in real time with me having the platform as we are doing, going through all this? And you are quite remarkable, Mr. Chris.
Thank you.
You are quite remarkable. And God bless you, and thank you.
Well, really? I mean, for me, it's the fact of at one point in life, I guess technically any order of disclosure I was under is up now. I've definitely admitted on this show that I am a former on-air producer for Alex Jones. Like, a lot of the reason I do this show the way I do it is because, like, hey, these are things that we should be talking about. Like, why is this ignored by the mainstream media? Why is it ignored even by people like Alex? Where, sure, they'll have you on, like you said, once, maybe twice. But are they following up? Are they actively keeping track of what's going on in the news and contacting you afterward and being like, hey, man, what's going on with this straight up propaganda campaign about it just being a cultural difference? Like, that's horrifying. That's literally, like, I posted an article earlier today to our Dudes and Beer group about an IKEA in in Atlanta, Georgia, who on Juneteenth made their menu fried chicken and watermelon. Now, I don't care who you are or the fact that you're a Scandinavian furniture company. You are in Atlanta, Georgia. That may very well be seen as a racist menu. I'm just going to throw it out there, IKEA or whatever manager or menu.
And you know, Chris, a lot of their where do you think a lot of their so-called Scandinavian furniture and all their stuff comes from? China. China.
So, you know, it's one of those like
if you say the China virus, you're racist. You know, you're racist.
Well,
this is what these people live for nowadays.
Well, you do literally have to be willing to call out the fact that yes, there are human rights organization.org, humanrightswatch.org. China uses rule of law to justify Falun Gong crackdown. There we go again from Engadget talking about Facebook blocking users from sharing news links coming from Australia or the Southern Hemisphere. So, like, it was anybody trying to share this kind of truth that it was systematically shut down. And it's wild to see those kind of things, to see that, and to see it literally laid out in front of you. Yet still to ignore it. And to allow it to go on. And granted, I'm not going to say that any manufacturer is guilty of using plants in Huai, China, or what have you, for any kind of, or even Foxconn, which is known for its, quote, suicide nets. But, man, if you're an Apple user, wow, that is some horrifying stuff if you start following that rabbit hole. And the human rights violations of that company abroad and in Asian countries.
Oh, absolutely. And one more thing about Mitch McConnell, the House Majority Leader.
Yeah.
His wife, Elaine Chao, was the transportation director, right? Secretary of Transportation in America. Her father owns the largest shipping conglomerate in China. And guess who he's buddy with? Yeah, that's right, folks. Jiang Zemin. And who is Jiang Zemin? Oh, the former president of the Chinese Communist Party, who actually conducted and started the brutal forced organ harvesting genocide against the Falun Gong. That guy?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
The Communist Health Organization, the Secretary General, Tedros. Oh, wasn't he a patsy for the CCP? What did he do? Oh, he covered up 3 cholera outbreaks in Ethiopia and took a large amount of money to conceal the bioweapon from China. Oh, that guy. Oh, and what about Wang Jiefu? You know who Wang Jiefu is? He sits on the board of the World Health Organization, which we call the Communist Health Organization, who was a liver transplant surgeon who oversaw the forced organ harvesting of Falun Gong practitioners and did actually a live organ harvesting surgery on a Falun Gong practitioner. And he was the vice president or the vice premier of the Ministry of Health in China, who now sits on the board of the World Health Organization, refuting the claims and debunking, trying to debunk and refuse all the evidence from the investigators. Oh, and the United Nations, aren't they supposed to be some kind of legitimate group supposed to help humanity? But why then are they allowing a murderous regime at slaughtering its own citizens in death camps, controlling 4 specialized units and almost the intellectual property unit of the United Nations? Imagine that, huh?
Yeah. Well, and like we were saying last time, within that video, to look at it and see the fact that they are by themselves almost in a UN chamber talking about that.
Yeah.
You know,
no, it's disgraceful.
there's not a whole lot of people hanging out in the room where they are giving their active testimony to everybody else. And I've actually got that shot on screen right now. Oh, hold on. There it is. That is their testimony to the UN.
Sick.
That's horrifying. This is a U.S. congressional hearing from UN doctors sent to investigate what was going on in China with the Falun Gong and was anything happening. And yes, they came back and said, absolutely, we went to investigate a horrible rumor, and it is not a horrible rumor. This is fact. And that was exactly the number of people who gave it to be able to show up to that meeting and that testimony.
Well, tell that to China Joe and Hunter Biden.
So,
anyway, Chris, it's a pleasure.
Before we let you go, because I mean, yes, absolutely, pleasure as always, Mitchell. And once again, at least twice, thrice a year, man, I want you on at a minimum, talking about this, bringing this from mountaintops. Where can people go? I've got faluninfo.net up right now.
Yes.
Where else can people go to see videos? Where can we go to get videos, to embed them on our videos page so that people can know where to find them? One last moment for shameless self-promotion for the cause.
No, absolutely. Endtransplantabuse.org as well, and stoporganharvesting.org, which is great as well. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And don't forget Hard to Believe, the documentary. And that's all she wrote, folks.
Once again, man, thank you so much. The information that you have to share is mind-numbing and soul-crushing as a human being, and to know that these kind of things still happen in our world. These kind of horrible negative vibrations are still vibrating like a gong around the world. And if they aren't, they should be. People like you should be bringing more light to this. There's a reason why I have decided to devote airtime from this show to this topic, because it's just beyond humanity to me to ignore it once I know about it. I can't not scream it from the mountaintops and, like you, just shoot flares from guns everywhere I go.
Absolutely. And you know, Chris, if you know any other podcasters that you are friends with would love to have you on, please let me know, and I'm more than ready and willing to go. And the more people, my mission is just the more people I can reach, the more people I can share and bring to light this issue about Falun Gong and the CCP, the better. And I do this for no money, no donations. I leave no name and I seek no reward. It's just because it's the right thing to do.
And I get no money from you or for it.
Yes,
Same thing.
It's only out of the kindness of the heart. That's what makes it so special. It's only from the kindness of the heart. It's true goodness. It's honor. It's virtue, and it's valor, and that is what's important. No amount of money, no amount of glory or fame or fortune can buy the heart. And the prerequisite for credibility is sincerity. And that's all she wrote, folks. So God bless you, Chris. And thank you very much, everybody, you know.
Absolutely. Please do hold the line while we close things out, if you can. Yes. While you are online, checking out all the great work by Mitchell Gerber, folks, make sure to stop on by the Dudes and Beer podcast. That is where you can download the app. That's where you can find all the episodes. That's where you can find everything. Make sure to check out CuriousRealm.com. That is what we will be transmogrifying into come December. Until next time, everybody, take care,